So it is 3 o'clock. Let's get started. And welcome to our webinar Pigment as Alternative to Replace SAP APO, the next level of advanced planning. A couple of things to mention upfront already on this slide. Why did we choose to compare to SAP APO? Because of the fact APO is end of life. So you need to start to think about alternatives at this moment, because if you move to, for example, IBP, that will be a lengthy implementation cycle. So knowing that it is end of life 2027, you need to consider alternatives now. The other thing is that we do not compare it only to SAP APO. We think Pigment can replace all kinds of other advanced planning systems. And a disclaimer up front, SAP APO or IBP, we do not think those are bad products, but we believe there are more affordable alternatives out there. So that's the main disclaimer we want to put up front. So moving to the next slide, a couple of things to mention for the agenda today. So first we will do a short introduction, some housekeeping rules, the introduction of the speakers. Then we will tell why we think Pigment is a good alternative to APO. Then we will show it in the demo, and afterwards we have plenty of time to answer all kinds of questions that you might have. And moving then to the introduction. So I mentioned already the Q&A part. So if you have any questions, then please raise them in the QA panel. So in Teams, you will have a Q&A panel up front. So you can you click on it, you open it, and with that you can enter your question. And during the meeting, we will go over the questions and we will answer them straight away. Or if we lack time during the meeting, we will do it later on after meeting. Or at the end, at the Q&A section. If there remain questions unanswered, we will follow up with an email to all the people who attended with the unanswered question and the answers. This, as you noticed, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be shared afterwards on our website, and everyone who attended will get a notification with a link to that recording, so you can share it later on within your organization if need be. And then a short introduction on the speakers. You will see Jurgen as one of the speakers as well. Jurgen, my colleague, is a very experienced supply chain consultant and also quite experienced in the implementation of all kinds of planning tools, including Pigment, and he will perform the demo during this webinar. So he will be leaving this webinar in a minute, so he will get back off stage. So you only have to focus on the content. My name is Jan Veerman. As well as Jurgen, I'm experienced in supply chain area and also experienced in the implementation of all kinds of planning tools. And I also happen to be the founder of Planadigm. Moving to the next section, a little bit short introduction on Planadigm, our organization. So it's based on 3 pillars, and the first one is experience. As you can see here, we have quite some experience in the area of supply chain, as well as in the implementation of the tool. So that means that we're quite capable of translating your business requirements into a fast and solid implementation of the tool. That means that we can improve your bottom line results quickly and also therefore create a great ROI in that case. The second pillar is more on the process side. So we do see that there is quite a lot of focus on the process area nowadays, due to the fact that companies need to be more resilient and react quicker to the events that are happening out there. The focus on proper S&OP and integrated business planning processes seems to be increasing. So that means that you need to be aligned on, internally aligned on, from a strategic intent on what you need to do, but also need to respond quickly to any events that happen out there. And the last pillar is more on the tool side. So we focus on Pigment, and the tool, and that's why we love the tool that much, is capable of providing a resilient environment. So that could mean that you can create scenarios in just a few clicks and compare those. And I haven't come across a tool where it's that quick and easy to do it. But it could also mean the end-to-end visibility, for example, within your own supply chain or part of the supply chain that you control, but also extending it upstream to your suppliers. But why not also to your customers, your top 20 customers? And instead of forecasting their numbers, why not let them input their demand straight away in the same platform? And exception reporting to focus the attention of the planners more on the exceptions instead of going all kinds of tables and data points. But the tool helps you to guide you to the exceptions where you need to focus. So with that, we move more to the comparison of Pigment, in this case, to APO. And why do we have that focus on APO? Because of APO is end of life. So SAP started to announce that APO was end of life almost 10 years ago. So they mentioned that it was end of life in 2017. Then they moved it to 2019, then to 2025, and now the final end of life is 2025. So in that case, they moved it over a period of more than 10 years, 4 times. Now, we will explain in a minute why that is. But they push customers, no, not push, they promote customers to move from APO to the IBP environment. But there's a difference. APO runs on the old core ECC and IBP runs on the S/4HANA, so the cloud-based environment. That means that it is not a straightforward migration, but it is an implementation. And we see that current SAP customers of APO are quite reluctant to move to the new environment. Mainly due to the technical differences in the platform. So from ECC to S/4HANA, that also means you have to upgrade the backbone to partly to S/4HANA, and that could cause all kinds of business and process disruption. So customers are quite reluctant to make that switch to the new platform. If you move from APO to IBP, it means you have long implementation cycles, on average 12 to 18 months out in a project before you have the IBP implemented. It also means that if you've done a couple of customizations in APO, IBP is not capable of handling that well. So the support for the customizations to move from APO to IBP is very poor. That is also that's also triggered by the fact that IBP does not have all the functionality that APO currently has. So that is for a couple of customers quite a step back. Besides that, a lot of companies therefore doubt that the value from the migration to IBP is quite low. And because of the fact that not all APO customers migrated, the number of use cases is lacking. So it means that APO customers are looking for alternatives. Now let's move to APO and see in those 4 areas. APO has 4 main areas if you look at it from a functional perspective. So the first one is on the demand planning side. So that means the basic forecasting, the life cycle management, as in end-of-life products, new product introductions that you can all manage in the demand planning area. You have the supply network planning area where you can do your safety stock settings and all kinds of constraints, for example, in your product flow planning. The third option is the production planning and detailed scheduling part. If you have several manufacturing sites regionally or across the globe, you can align those planning to make sure that you can deliver. but also the different kinds of planning based on make to stock, make to order, engineer to order. Those kinds of dynamics can be managed in the production planning and detailed scheduling part. And the final functional area is the available to promise. So if you need to do allocations, the tool can support you there, and also, for example, in the back order management. Having said that, those are the main four functional areas which APO has, and that's mainly creating the right parameters in the already set functionality. If you compare that to Pigment, for example, we will see that a lot of use cases, as we did see in the APO environment, we are capable of translating. But there are also a couple of things that Pigment cannot do. So if you need to have optimization, and optimization in that case based on programming, so linear, non-linear programming or stochastic programming, for example, the Pigment platform is not capable of doing that. And the other thing is detailed scheduling. For example, you have several factory lines within a factory, and you need to do detailed scheduling and also see it visually and able to drag and drop different batches across the lines. Pigment is not capable of doing that. So if those two use cases are of any concern to you, then Pigment is not the right tool for you. If the optimization on the other hand is based on basic business rules, so for example, if then else statements, then Pigment can translate that. But those two use cases, so optimization, detailed scheduling, Pigment is not capable of doing. Moving to that part, Pigment can do quite a lot of other use cases. So we've done implementation, for example, on the demand planning side, and we've created, based on the loads of actuals, a system-generated forecast, outlier detection, consensus forecasting, NPIs, end-of-life management, all kinds of things regarding demand planning. On the supply planning part, we created the final demand signal, for example, the consensus demand signal, and we translated into the net requirements based on stock levels, order quantities, for example, like that, into the net requirements. And if the capacity was lower than the demand, also helped in the allocation part. Demand planning and supply planning can then be also translated in the financial planning part. So if you have your volumes in your demand and supply planning part, and you have, for example, your price pocket waterfall, so cost pricing all the way up to your sales pricing, you can translate it also in financial statements like P&L, balance sheet, and cash flows. And also do all kinds of breakdowns, for example, on cost components where you would break it down, for example, specific energy cost based on square meters of a warehouse or the number of employees. And the last part, for example, is workflow. The tool really helps in supporting the planners in automation of the process and guiding the planners in the step-by-step approach in the process by the dashboards. So the end users will always see dashboards and the use of KPIs. And it can handle quite large data sets. So for one customer, we already loaded millions of transactional data in the tool, and it was capable of handling that quite well. Now, excellent, by the way, and performed excellent. So there you have the main comparison. So we think that Pigment can do quite a lot that advanced planning tools, in this case APO, can do. But in two specific cases, we have to move you to another tool. Going to the next slide, where we would say what is then the power and the benefit of the our combined efforts of Planadigm and Pigment. So we believe that our benefit is in our knowledge, our experience in the S&OP part and in the tooling part. So we're quite capable of translating your requirements into a fast and precise implementation of the tool. That also means that we can offer you a full service stack from setting up the requirements all the way to second line support once the project has been implemented. During that implementation, of course, we do a lot of knowledge transfer to the business to make sure that once we're gone, the day-to-day maintenance can be done by business planners and business users. The Pigment platform, on the other hand, is based on latest technology, low-code, no-code kind of platform. So it allows for a single source to load in all kinds of data sets. It has direct connectors, for example, to all kinds of data sources. But it also allows for connected planning, where you can connect demand planning, supply planning, to HR planning, to financial planning in one platform. It is really intuitive, so the user adaptation is very high, and it has a lot of Excel interfacing that they're used to. And also good to mention is the adaptability of the tool. It's quite flexible in the backend, but also in the planning cycles. And it means that we all know that a plan is never fixed from a requirement perspective. Once the users start to use the platform, they have additional change requests to add as a functionality to the platform. So it means the tool is quite flexible of following the demands of the planners. And it also means that the analytical requests that they want to do now are not the same as tomorrow, because a different event occurred in the supply chain and they need additional analytics and overview. And the tool is capable of following the business planner. On the ROI part, Forrester, a research company, did a research under current Pigment users, and they came up with an ROI of over 300% over 3 years. If you look closely at those numbers, it mainly falls in 2 buckets. So the efficiency part, so less time needed, and all kinds of productivity savings. And the other part is in the cost saving. So it could mean, for example, that you would reduce the costs of an old planning legacy system. If you have an in-house planning system which is running on servers, for example, and it needs IT, and you move to Pigment, for example, then you can reduce a lot of costs there. We think on the S&OP part that additional ROI can be gained by, for example, creating a higher forecast accuracy. So resulting in more sales, lower stock levels, for example, and all kinds of cost savings in that area. Then we slowly move to the demo, and I will hand it over to my colleague Jurgen, and he will do a proper introduction of the tool. And after the demo, we'll be back on stage to discuss what we have seen and discuss. Then we slowly move into the Q&A. Jurgen?
Yeah, thank you, Jan. So maybe good to mention what you are going to see for the demo. So let's say setting the stage. We have created a couple of models in Pigment where we use some demo data, which is about a drone manufacturer. So that drone manufacturer has kind of 4 plants for the supply part, but it sells his products for different brands or to different customers across the world. So it is not related to a use case of an existing customer, but from there, the forecast is translated based on a bill of material to the individual component level. So all that information, like also SAP can do, is also possible in Pigment, where you using multi-layers of bill of materials. But maybe one good remark on this is that in the demo, and you will see that in a second, is that we have the whole planning is done on months, also for the supply planning part, while we know in most of the majority of the times, organizations use supply planning in weeks. But you're quite flexible in Pigment to say, okay, I want to use planning on weeks, months, quarter, years, or even days if you want to do that. But in our case, we used months. And based on that, for a little bit of setting the scene, on that you are a little bit of familiar with kind of data that you will see, is that I will start sharing my browser. And what you will see right now is Pigment. So maybe good to know already that I'm already logged in. I'm already logged into a specific model, in this case, a statistical forecasting model. So for people that doesn't know Pigment, and this is the first time that you see it, Pigment is, as we call it, a fast planning or a planning platform. That means that you can model your planning process in this application. And let me put myself a little bit off stage to have that you have the full screen, but you still hear my voice. So that means that you can model your own business process around the use cases that you want to have. So you're not forced to go in one specific direction. And that also, based on the low code, no code, makes it quite easy to adjust the platform to your requirements, instead of that a lot of customization that you additionally have to pay for, as an example. Now, what do you see in Pigment and in this example? On the left side, we have a couple of boards. So these are the dashboards that end users will see, and I will start opening in a minute the outlier ones. And then on the other side, because I'm logged in as a full user or an admin, as a modder, I can see also more the technical structure behind there. But let's go first at the outlier. So what you see at this moment is a couple of things already. So on top is that you see the selections that are there possible. So based on the data that is loaded into Pigment or synchronized across different models, you can make your selection in there. And it's multi-dimensional selection, which means that you are not forced to have already thought about a proper structure, or that you are forced to a structure in that regard, and you can make different kind of selections. So in this example, let me take, for example, Germany. And for Germany, we are going to create an outlier detection, or the system is generating an outlier based on parameters. And let's take a product like the SW120. So what you will see directly is based on actuals that is loaded into the system. And this is 3 years of actuals, but it can also be 2 years or 1 year or in week periods. We have also some customers that wants to have the complete forecasting weeks. You can see here the outlier detection. So everything what you will see in here is customizable. That means is that the process that we have showed now, or that we show, or to calculate or create the outlier, can be different for your organization than we currently showing here. What I can see in the table or in the chart is the periods that are an outlier or not. And I can also identify if I want to remove this specific outlier and keep it in there. And an outlier can be whatever reason it can be. Normally, you are aware, if you do promotions, that it is not an outlier that should be part of your data set. Maybe you have regular promotions every period, for example. In this example, when I want to remove it, I get directly an option that I need to give a reason why I want to keep this specific outlier on there. So you can, besides only adjusting it, you can also force reasons to do that. So you can make it more driver based, and a driver based or driver from the planner itself, why you need to, or why you're forcing a certain direction or decision. So from the end, let's assume that we have all the correct corrections done in the outlier detection. We can go to the statistical forecast. So when I click on the statistical forecast, my product is still there loaded based on the selection. So across the different dashboards or across the different boards, it remembers all the selections that you have made as a user. So and what we see in here is based on some forecast parameters. I can adjust where needed based for the different models. I can see what my actuals are with a certain pattern. and also I can see what my potentially forecast would be and what my forecast pattern would be, and if it is a positive or a negative trend. So based on the model calculation, so we in this example we use a root mean square deviation, the RMSE, to calculate which statistical forecast method gives our best result. And these are some models that we have implemented into this application, but maybe you have some customized statistical forecast models that you wanted to have, and also there, then it's possible to even add that on top and create those based on business rules. So in this case, the model calculates based on the lowest number, what should our best fit model be, and uses that. But also here you have still the possibility to override. So from a process point of view, normally this is not what a planner will do, a sales planner, for example, would do, but really demand planner, and does this or reviews this every maybe 3 months or 6 months, depending on your process. But normally you would not adjust every week or every month your statistical forecast method or model. Now, based on that, we can also compare how it would look like with the different selections of models that we wanted to have. So you can make a comparison, and also based on some accuracy of the model, you can make some best guess or make an estimation what you wanted to have. Now, besides that, it is also still possible to have a manual forecast input where you then say this should be my starting point for having my manual forecast. But besides that, we also calculate seasonality. So in this example, what we do is based on some seasonality information and patterns, like if we're using a centered moving average, so taking, let's say, from each period of a month, we take 5 periods up front, 5 periods after, so that we really have a centered of a moving average. And based on that, we can then create a different kind of seasonality compared to the seasonality if you're only looking at really the actuals. And so you are more streamlining, or let's say estimation, have a better estimation of your trend cycle from the seasonal data that you have. You see the differences on there, but also on still the country and the product combination, I can also say I want to use my own different customization regarding a seasonality index. Then in the end, this is a statistical forecast model. Then we have a result, and what you will see in here that from the result is that based on historical ratios or ratios that you are created up front, saying, okay, these are my customers that are part of Germany having this product in there, and this is maybe my historical split of ratios that I use. But I can also override that. Now, why is this an advantage? Think about that. Maybe in your organization there is, and that sounds a little bit strange, is a little bit of lack of trust on what planners or salespeople are doing. So you can already, let's say, if you want to have a strategic point of view for a certain customer that you want to grow, and also have there a little bit of more already, let's say, reserved forecast or capacity in the end, taking into account, you can also manipulate and adjust that already in here. So you think you can also use them already or adjust some strategy in here, and that will then replicate it or will be already adjusted into your SNOP model. And over in the bottom, you see the nice overview in a chart again, how the split is between the different customers of that selection. Now, what we can do from here is directly go to a different model. Sorry. So when I click on here, I directly go to a different model. And what you see that also coming back in here is that I'm now in a sales and operations planning model where we have a little bit more dashboards. So we have here dashboards about, for example, the product lifecycle management. So the end of life, to manage your products that goes end of life, or that you want to have products introduced, but also the segmentation think about the ABC, XYZ axis and so on. We have our demand planning process where we have the statistical forecast review as an example, and I will come back on that in a second. So that you will see that regularly in here. But we have also, for example, the sales plan done by a country, so a higher aggregated level or a detailed level at the customer level, maybe some marketing added value or customer collaboration, where you really have there also that your customer provide you a forecast and can log into the system and can also provide their input. Now, in the end, that comes to a consensus demand, and you will see that in the end, we can go then from the consensus demand into the supply planning, where we have capacity planning, our production master schedule, inventory planning on component level, inventory planning on product level, but also the translation from the bill of material, and even have overviews for the suppliers, which have regarding the procurement for the raw material purchasing and that kind of stuff. Now, in the end, you can add and customize this process and customize the dashboards that you want to see based, of course, on the access rights and so on. And you can make that extend and customize that to your own wishes or processes that you want to have regarding your own supply planning and demand planning process. One difference is what you see in here, but that was not directly visible in the statistical forecast model, is that we have now a scenario baseline. So that means is from here, and I created upfront already a scenario webinar, but we can create easily scenarios in here. So from here, I can say I want to create a scenario, and that scenario should be the source of my scenario that I already have selected, which means that you can have scenario on scenario on scenario on scenario. That gives you really that power of the what if possibilities. So as an example, just to showcase how fast this is, and when I'm creating a scenario, it's directly for the complete model where it is in. So in this case, that model is directly this scenario is directly having an impact on the demand planning part, on the supply planning part, on the financial planning part, and all the other use cases that is part of this model. So let's say I create a webinar test, and when you see when I'm creating it, it's already there. It's already selected. I can already do something with it. I can already adjust when I need it. So the power of Pigment is really, I would say, is the what if scenarios. And I think that is becoming more and more needed in this kind of planning volatility that we are in, like what we had with the blockage of the Suez Canal, of course, COVID, and you see now also with some issues on the labor market here, where it's very hard to find the right people. So it really the scenario capabilities is, I would say, in this kind of days a must to have in your system. When I'm coming back to this part, is that I, as a planner, let's say I'm an account manager, I can review in here what my statistical forecast is created. So based on as a result from my previous model. I cannot make adjustments on here, but I can only see this was my actuals and these were the actuals based on my outlier correction. Now, what I can do, I can go then to my sales plan by country. And in my sales plan by country, what I see there is a couple of things. I see directly there a bigger horizon. So I see in here on a monthly level, my financial of my full year of 2021, 2022, 2023, all the way to 2027. But I see a clear split between what was actuals, what was a statistical forecast, and what was an enrichment. So that means what you see in the table below is that we have our statistical forecast, which can be a baseline generated by the system or can be loaded by a third-party system. And then the account manager can be adjusting that number by adding or removing some values. That gives you a total, for example, a total sales plan. And what this allows you to have those different metrics is to calculate and show in the end a forecast value add. So how much added value gives a planner to your forecast? Because keeping track of those different kinds of metrics, you can really say, okay, this was done by the system. This was done by Planner A. And please, Planner A, keep up the good work because you're performing better than a system, for example. Or Planner B, please don't do that again because the system is better than you. So you can, in the end, that allows you get better insights and also more transparency, I would say, and visibility on what the possibilities are. Now, let's assume that I make a very big adjustment in here, let's say for this specific product, for this country, and instead of I fill in the number 2, I fill in the number 500. You see directly it representing back in my chart, but I can give a specific comment in here, which I say, okay, I made an adjustment on my complete Germany country level for this product because of reason X, Y, Z. But maybe I want to validate or allow a discussion with my manager or with my counterpart to say, okay, this is what I want, this is what I have to fill in, and how is that comparable, or do you agree? So I can create a comment, and it's a little bit like Excel. I can also tag people, for example, and then I can have that discussion not outside of the tool, but within the application itself to say on that specific cell or really on that specific combination. And when I'm typing this, Jan will get a notification and an email and a notification within Pigment. But there I can really have the discussion on the content instead of, let's say, the already, then I have it afterwards and it's a finger pointing to each other. So when I've done this, I have also the possibility to override. And the override is to say, okay, instead of giving that number 500 as an addition, I really want to override the value. But this is dependent on the selection that you make. So that is really, how do you say that? Yeah, selection based is that stored as a parameter. Now, what I can do from here is going into a very detailed level and go into, for example, a customer, and where I see that from a customer level, representing that back. So I still see my 500 units back, but now it is more in a detailed level. So taking already the ratio into account that was filled in prior to the statistical forecast engine, it is based on that where my 500 is deviated using that percentages. And then I can go into my individual customer, or I can say for this specific customer, these are all the products that I have. So you can even combine different views in one screen at the same time. Now, in the end, when we go to the customer forecast, it's a kind of similar view, but there a customer can log in and see only his or her products. But in the end, we have our consensus demand. And take this as an example where I delete, deselect, let's say, everything. And I take only one specific other product, maybe another one. And there, what I see is then my total consensus, how I come to that final number. Okay? So as my final approval, maybe as a demand manager or a demand planner that is very close to the supply part, I can say, okay, I have products which are end of life or MPIs, or I have my marketing contribution for that specific product or region based. Maybe I have some enrichment for my customer, and maybe I want to give also my own feedback to that total number to say, okay, I want to adjust it where needed because I've already a little bit more in-depth insight or not. Yep. Then from here, in the end, the consensus demand is resulted into your supply planning part. So from a supply planning part, we can say we have our capacity planning in, for example, Amsterdam. So we're removing the part of the customers, but all the products are combined now, and then based on parameters where they have, where you maybe have some capacity or about or some settings like, okay, this product can only go to that specific location or can go over to that specific site or individual line within a specific production location and so on. You can make that also customizable to your own process. Now, what we see in here as an example is the capacity for a year. So I'm selecting a current year. I see my utilization for the coming 4 years, including this one. But I see also, depending on that, how it is compared to my other regions or to my other peers, let's say, of my organization. And what you see also more in depth in here is that the demand, not in quantities, but in hours. So to have also maybe your capacity in hours, like how many FTEs or people are working a shift in your line, but also maybe some machinery that are working X hours that have some throughput capacity regarding hours and so on. And the demand, how you can convert that into from units into hours is where there is on the background parameters like how fast it is produced over a certain line or part of a line, but also what is your yield or your waste, or at least what you need to put in to get 1 unit out of there. And based on that, you have with a simple calculation rule, you can convert units into hours, so that you give that like-for-like comparison into the system. And what you can do in here is on a detailed level to say, okay, this product, the Q200, is produced in Amsterdam, but this Q200, I had some issues in my capacity in February, for example, but it's now 99.8. So I moved 300 units in February and I moved that prior. So you can play around with the movement of your demand where you want to switch around the different demand pieces so that you have the right capacity. Now, it's also possible to inventory. So what you see as an example is per product, the available inventory. And then per product, the inventory with the different inventory lots can be that you have inventory on a specific site located, but that can be maybe also be global inventory where it is possible to use inventory on different locations and so on. So there are have the possible for different rule sets in order to allow that. Now, and in this case, I can say I want to use 100 pieces that I already have as a finished product, and therefore my inventory is lower, but therefore my requirement is not 390 pieces for this period, but it is 290 pieces. Now, the supply planner can plan and can adjust and balance that out accordingly. And based on what we just have seen with the capacity or with that specific scenario, I can also have my 2 different scenarios compared. So I had in one scenario, I had, for example, 500 units added, and what you can see in here is based on the different selections is, for example, what my differences is between different scenarios. So I can choose or adjust different scenarios that I have created to just to validate my plan. And based on that, I can make the right comparison. Okay, what would be my ideal scenario? So in an example, the worst case, you see it's really worst case where the utilization is really over the 200%. 1 second. Is over the 200%. But in here, you can really make your plan already and think about, okay, what would be the right action and the right move to do and to go forward in order to facilitate my feasible plan, because in the end, it's a planning solution where you want to have your right planning, that it goes into your execution system. So in here, I can compare my different capacity constraints or my capacities that I have. And then you can also have then the insights on a more detailed level. What does that mean for my production schedule? So what are my scheduled production already, for example? But also, let's take Amsterdam again. But also, how does that reflect, for example, with already the planned production and what production is already scheduled? And how do I want to balance that out? Compare maybe to some other products that are on this location. I made some already adjustment call, but you see maybe the Q4 4001 has an issue because there maybe I need to tackle something else in there. And also this is scenario based, meaning everything what I'm adjusting in one scenario is directly stored and on that. So you saw never a button save, you saw never a button recalculate. It's all recalculated and calculated in memory. Now, also taking into account the time, it's much more to tell, and I'm happy to do that. But we can also do that maybe afterwards, that we have a meeting on that part. But one of the last things that I wanted to show is the breakdown of, for example, bill of material. So I have here my still my Amsterdam location as for the production. I have my Q200 product, and now I see, based on the adjustments that I did in my capacity part, with movements of the demand, with adding or using inventory, I see that I have a lower requirement in February, for example. But I also want to know from a procurement perspective, maybe, or an MRP perspective, what is the effect for my individual components? So because the demo data is about drones, is what you see the different kind of categories of the how a drone is built up. So a radio transmitter, a flight controller, a speed controls, battery, propellers, a motor, and a frame. But you see here the initial requirement. Also, on a component level, maybe I work in I've WIP stock, work in progress stock, or semi-finished products. So it can be that I also have their inventory already on hand. So even there, it is possible to say, for this individual component, I want to use my inventory like that. I still can reduce lower the amount of capacity or the production or even purchasing that I need to do. And in the end, you see my final requirement on that perspective. This is again translated back to the supplier part, because maybe you have some different suppliers on your component level, where you have a preferred supplier with different prices attached to it, maybe certain contracts agreement where you need to uphold to a certain amount of components within in a year, so that you have to taking into account a certain threshold. And this is all visible and feasible based off that you can translate your in the end, your from a demand plan to your supply plan to your component level, all the way to supply to supplier. Now, based on that cost component, you can also think about that you in the end you have your final financial review, where you go into, okay, what does that mean for my profit, because I have maybe a higher cost price, or I make some adjustments. So what is my initial cost price of my product, so that you can also calculate what is your material cost, your wage cost, and so on. So as a small recap on that, what you see is that you can completely model your planning process for the supply chain part within one tool or one platform like Pigment. So it can also do giving more insights, as for example that APO. You need to come back in the end maybe to synchronize with CIF, as it's called, the core interfacing part with ECC, where you need to integrate data what you see in here from the statistical forecast model, you saw directly the results in my SNOP model because of the data is shared and synced and real life shared between the different models. So there is no need for import, export, or some certain integration method within the platform itself. And that is my last remark. And then Jan, you can continue again.
Yes, Jurgen, thank you. Can you put on the presentation back on?
Yeah.
So for people attending, I hope that you did like the presentation so far, the demo. Taking into account that we're comparing Pigment to APO, but also other APS systems. Let's do so this was the demo slide. So let's recap a little bit here. So after what we have seen, and from a business perspective, what we think Pigment, why Pigment is a great choice for the business is mainly because of a couple of things. The visibility. So Jurgen showed a lot of dashboards where the visibility from demand planning to supply planning and financial planning is Pigment is capable of showing you. So in the platform, you can connect all kinds of data sources. That could mean your ERP system, all the way down to HR systems, but also CSV files can be loaded into the system. So all kinds of systems, left or right, we can load it into the environment, meaning that you get that full visibility across your own supply chain. It could also mean that you can extend it. So you can also extend it to your suppliers or even the suppliers of your suppliers. So they could get access to a part of your planning model to make sure that they, instead of requesting that information by email and you get an email, you get an Excel sheet that you need to translate somehow. No, you can give them access to the platform where they can enter the data directly. The other way around as well. You could also enter or ask the top 20 customers to enter their demand straight into the system instead of you forecasting it. In that case, any disruptions upstream or downstream your supply chain will be immediately visible, and you have the capability to respond quickly and also based on the scenarios as Jurgen showed. To do that, the platform needs to have enhanced security. So the tool does provide that. You only want your supplier A to see their data instead of supplier A looking at supplier B data. So the enhanced security is really ingrained into the underlying model and could be really detailed to a low level of detail. And in the end, it is actually business owned. So instead of IT owned, it is really business owned. So what we do during the implementation, we transfer the knowledge of implementing Pigment to the business users. And after we're gone, they're capable of doing the day-to-day maintenance. So you don't need IT to keep the model up to date on a day-to-day basis. And we'll only come back for larger projects to support the team and guide them into a proper implementation. It supports really agile business planning and reporting. As you can see, the dashboards that Jurgen showed were all own made. So that's not a default model that's in there. Now we can tailor that specific to the needs of the planner. And therefore it's really flexible, flexible in all kinds of ways. You can load in data and make sure that your latest product hierarchy is updated, for example, based on the transactional data that you load. Had the ability to create a new scenario just by a few clicks and then compare it across the platform later on after you've made changes is also really a great USP from the platform. And as Jurgen showed, it's real-time reporting. So changes made in the model are constantly recalculated throughout all the applications on top of this platform. No need to trigger any process in the backend. And with that, we're hoping to break down all kinds of functional areas and functional silos within organizations. So the platform is capable of connecting different functional areas. So sales, from forecasting demand, to operations, the supply side, finance, and human resources, and each they're having their own model. And based on security, they can see their own data, but the outcome, for example, of the demand planning process is the input for the supply planning process. And the output of demand and supply could be the input of the finance model, and vice versa. Also from allocation from top-down management to break down the financial figures into a financial forecast to a lower level. And that allows for great collaboration. As you did see here, we could add comments to specific fields to make sure that any decision made in the platform is somewhere documented, and each one can look at those comments. It already is a fast and smart business planning platform, but Pigment is releasing in the near future, somewhere this year. They do not tell us when, but they're on the brink of releasing Pigment AI. And Pigment AI comes in different tastes. The first one, for example, is the assisted one. Assisted, for example, data visualization. So think of ChatGPT kind of prompt box where you can enter a sentence like, give me the overview, or give me the revenue overview for the different regions per month, and Pigment then starts to translate your request into a graph. And based on the data, you could say, but give me now for the last 3 months for customer X a full P&L overview. So you can do a more deep dive on the data that you have seen in the first graph. So you can, it's a Q&A kind of prompting box that you can do all kinds of analysis. And as we all know, the reporting request that the planner might have today is probably not the one that he has tomorrow, because an event occurs in a supply chain and he needs to solve it. So he needs to have a different angle, a different view of the same data. The other one, also more interesting from our perspective, is the time series forecasting. So based on machine learning algorithms, additional forecast algorithms will be implemented into the model and support you in the implementation cycle, making sure that it can be implemented very, very quickly. So covering all that, we think that with the functionality, the fast and smart business planning, we can create a lower total cost of ownership. That is also the introduction of the next slide. And then we compare to APO and the IBP environment. So the number of the licenses are cheaper compared to the SAP ones. And the implementation cycle is much, much shorter. So I mentioned for IBP, on average, 12 to 18 months. And then you have your first IBP implementation ready. We can do a full SNOP somewhere between 3 and 4 months, for example. Looking back, so we started at a comparison of APO and Pigment. So we did see that a lot of functionality that APO has can be modeled into Pigment. There were only 2 use cases where we say, that's difficult. If you really focus on those 2 topics, then Pigment is not the choice you need to go after. And it allows for really fast and smarter business planning. And with that, we hope you have inspired you to look at other alternatives compared to SAP. So there are, we're not saying IBP is bad, we're saying there are alternatives out there that can also help you in becoming more flexible and in supporting your process. So if you have any other questions, want to know more, want to do a deep dive on a specific demo tailor-made for you, for example, please reach out to us after the session and we can set up an additional meeting. And with that, we move to the Q&A part. So couple of questions. I see. Why do you only compare to APO? Yeah, like I said in the beginning, APO is end of life. And because of that, we thought APO users need to start, if you want to move to IBP, you need to start to plan that migration or that implementation now. And that for us, it's a nice way to start to have you a broader vision on what other APS systems could do. So that's why we compare to APO, but indeed, we could also compare to other APS systems. A typical Pigment implementation, how long does that look like? Yeah, depends a little bit which components, but we do say, okay, take it use case by use case. So start, for example, with demand planning first. That's something we could do within 1 to 2 months, depending a little bit also on the availability of the business resources on your side, because we want to do a co-development to make sure that we do a knowledge transfer. If we then move to supply, that's another 2 to 3 months on top of that, and then also financial 1 to 2 months on top. So if you have a full S&OP, depending on availability of your resources, could be between 4 to 6 months if you break it down into demand, supply, and financial one. And I have to do a refresh here. Can Pigment connect to sources like SAP? Pigment can, in fact, connect to any source out there. Pigment has out of the box some direct connectors that you can use. You can use API calls, and of course, there's always the CSV environment that you see extractions of your source system, and you can connect those CSVs into the platform itself. So that's quite quick to do. So any source system will do. And we always say the Pigment platform is on top of your ERP system to support strategic, tactical, and the first layer of operational planning. We have to say we've done this implementation now for a couple of large international players as well. So it is a good fit for the SMBs, so smaller and medium business type of companies, but also for multinationals. So it's not specific for any type of business, but it could be smaller companies, larger companies. Industry-wise, it also doesn't matter. And with that, I do not see any other questions. I want to thank you all for attending. Like we mentioned, we will share the recording once it's available on our website, so you can share it internally as well. If you want to reach out, you can see the details here. If you want to do a more detailed, in-depth deep dive based on your requirements, please let us know, and we'll reconnect based on the requirements that you might have. With that, have a great afternoon. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.